Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we sit down with Krystal Oriadha, the new chair of the Prince George's County Council. There are big decisions on the horizon for county lawmakers. Will they greenlight the proposed Sphere project for the National Harbor? Who will they vote in tomorrow to be the next new council member for District 4? Is this the last of the county council musical chairs? And is the county ready for this weekend's big expected snowstorm? We're going to look at those issues and much more. Chair Oriadha, thank you so much for talking to us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure thing. First of all, congratulations on being voted as the new chair. I do want to talk about the snowstorm. Obviously, the management of that is in the executive branch of the county government, but you're still going to see it when it gets here. And I'm sure you remember when now County Sixth Attorney Tara Jackson was the acting county executive. She was very, very transparent in saying that the county was not doing the job that she said was expected. What are your thoughts as we move into this weekend? What do you think we've learned from that?
Yeah, the council felt the same way with the state of where the administration was before. And we even passed legislation asking for more transparency specifically on these plans. But I will say that the county executive has been very clear with her team on a vision and making this a priority. She tells this story where her dad said this is the number one issue. So no one wants to hear her dad call. So I say that to say we've had emergency conversations where they'll test runs, where they'll get all of the leaders on the phone, like with a phone tree immediately to see if that's working, if everyone can get on the phone in a timely manner. They are looking at ways in which we can even have mobile sites where leaders across the county can be able to be there in real time and watch what's happening. We are also going to have an emergency briefing tomorrow in front of the council to hear their plan more in depth. So I say that to say I think this county executive and this administration is taking it very seriously. They've been working and testing out their strategy. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to see a huge difference in the response under our current county executive.
As we have seen in many years past, and when I say many, I mean many, many years past, that municipalities have had to do some additional planning when they know that a snowstorm is coming. This is supposed to be a whopper. And so what do you expect to hear tomorrow in this emergency briefing in anticipation of not only the biggest snowstorm that we've seen this winter, but possibly the biggest that we've seen in several years?
Yeah, I think really working out some of the issues we heard about in the last briefing. Like one of the issues was that there was a disconnect because we're supposed to be able to track which streets have been plowed, right? So we can when people are calling, we're able to update them and know the status. But there was a disconnect between the systems and being updated correctly on if the streets were actually paved or not. And so I look to hear an update that kink in the system has been worked out, that they've done test runs, that they have looked at those high volume streets that sometimes weren't getting prioritized. And those are conversations we had in our last briefing, taking to heart the streets that council members are flagging and really utilizing us and making us part of the conversation because, like you said, it sits with the county executive, but the reality is most people call their council member first. We're easy to access. And so we're going to know firsthand and rapidly where the system might not be working and how they're going to fold in us to the team so that we can make sure that the streets are getting paved and they're getting paved fast and the community is getting information that's clear and it's up to date.
What are you expecting to hear relative to communications with the state? The Maryland Transportation Authority, Maryland Transportation Department spokesperson Chuck uh, Gishler said yesterday that one of the biggest concerns is not snow, but the cold. And that, as we know, at certain temperatures, certain extremely cold temperatures, brining does not work.
Yeah, so I think we're definitely concerned about that. And part of this conversation came up, I think, in the last briefing about just what we're using. The quality of salt
Mhm.
that we're using, understanding what works at what temperature, um, and to be prepared for all possibilities. So I expect an update on that information. And I think what I would also like to see is like clear communication with residents that is better than what we've seen in the past. And
Mhm.
especially when we talk about, because when you mention the coal, what's also important is understanding what this means for our unhoused population. What does this mean for access to shelters and warm nights? And so there's lots of facets of this that have to come into play. And I am looking to see real clear coordination with those efforts in the briefing tomorrow.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about the changes on the county council. As I said in the open, it has been likened to musical chairs. Obviously, the members have moved into other positions, and the like. But from the perspective of a county resident. We
Mhm.
have Councilmember Walla Begay, who is now at large. Daniel Hunter is now representing District 6. The council is expected to name a replacement for District 4 that was vacated by Ingrid Watson.
Mhm.
How do you, as the new chair, manage these
Mhm.
transitions, the optics, and
Mhm.
kind of really maintaining continuity?
Mhm. Yeah, so two parts. One thing that was really important to me, I talked to all of the members because, I understand that, especially those council members that are termed out, they're making decisions that make sense for them and their families, and especially with, Councilmember Hawkins, how he shared about his wife's health. And
Mhm.
so I have those conversations with all of the members and just say, as soon as they know something, let me know so that we have the time to prepare. What was really important to me was making the process transparent, but also fast. What I didn't want was for us to go into the session and people not have representation because the budget's going to drop. And the reality is that if a district does not have someone fighting for them, uh, they can be left behind. And giving whatever council member steps into that seat as much time to get acclimated to the role as possible. Those were things that were important to me. The law is very flexible in the sense that the council could just appoint someone, right? It doesn't have to be a process. But for me, it was really important that there was a process. I looked at what the Central Committee tends to use as their process, since they have appointments more often than we do as a body, and tried to mirror that process so that it would be one that the community was used to and felt was fair and transparent. But I get it. The community wants to make sure that they have a voice and who represents them. And in 6 months that they'll have that opportunity at the ballot box to permanently pick their representation.
This is not an unusual process. The same thing is happening in the District of Columbia
Yep.
with Kenyon McDuffie's seat. We've seen it also um,
Montgomery.
in Montgomery County.
Hmm.
One could argue that even though it seems somewhat insular, you all are members of a rather exclusive club. But some would also say that the upside is that there doesn't have to be a special election, because if there were, there would certainly be chaos in trying to hold 3 or 4
Yeah,
special elections in Prince George's County to replace council members.
exactly. 3 or 4, and then especially 6 months out from a election, right? I had a lot of feelings about the special elections and how much money it cost. I mean, you're
Mm.
talking about upwards of 10 to $15 million spent on special elections. Uh, I just think that, especially when you're close to an election, right? Less than a year out from a general, is that the best way we should spend our money? I don't think so. Um, if we were talking about someone stepping down within the first 3 months of getting elected, I totally understand why there's an importance for an election. And that's how our process is currently. When we think about the state level, right, at any point, it's an appointment. It doesn't matter if someone only serves one day of their 4-year term, it's an appointment. But I think what the council has done is find a balance where there's a special election, if there's years, multiple years left to serve, but if we're in a healthy balance between an election that's already pending, that it's an appointment, so it doesn't needlessly cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars.
Mm. How do you go about making a decision? How do you go about selecting someone that you believe in your voting is appropriate for this District 4 seat? And I should ask, or from the previous seat, the District
Mhm.
6 seat, or even the voting to support Walla Blagay as the at-large council members. I mean, are you getting calls from constituents, or are you just kind of sitting in your own mind along with other council members trying to figure out who might be best for this seat?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything, right? It's one, especially as the chair, understanding the dynamic of our body, um, and looking at this is what I would say for me, just understanding this role and being so that ran for this seat is that I know as a starting base, I could not, in good conscience, vote for anyone that I've never seen before in the community. That is for me. Everyone might be different. But me, if I have never seen you in any capacity, I would not, in good faith, be able to vote for you. So that's a base for me. I'm also looking for someone that's done a level of work and in community without a title. They're not just showing up because there's an appointment. They've been active in their community in some way, shape, or form already. And I think what's important to me is that I would say for anyone that I have supported so far, they did their due diligence of, I know, reaching out to myself and other council members and meeting in depth about their willingness to serve, why they want to serve, and multiple people did reach out for both or for both seats. But I think that's an important thing too, because it shows me someone that already understands how this works, right? They understand the role, because 90% of this job is going to be reaching out, negotiating, and working with your colleagues across the districts. And someone that understands that walking in and the importance of that also will elevate them when it comes to making a decision. So those are the things that I look at. Someone that's been in the community, someone that I know has been in the community, someone that understands how politics works and can hit the ground running to represent their districts.
Hmm. I need to take a break, but before I do, would you like to share your thoughts on who you might support?
Well, they haven't sent us all of the applications yet, so I want to do my due diligence of looking at all of the names and hearing everyone speak before I make my final decision.
You can't blame me for trying. Uh,
No, good try.
There you go. We're going to take a break. Don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation with Krystal Oriadha, the new chair of the Prince George's County Council. We are talking all things Prince George's. I want to talk about probably the biggest thing coming to the county in quite some time, if indeed it happens, biggest physically and and otherwise, the sphere, which there was a lot of discussion, earlier this week about this Sphere entertainment venue. This is quite similar to, for anyone who has ever been to Las Vegas, seen the huge Sphere there. It's slated for the National Harbor. Tell me about your thoughts about this idea.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing opportunity for the county. That's my initial thought. I think we've talked about economic development and what we need to do to really change the dynamic of how our county is seen as historically a bedroom community, not as much investment in commercial compared to housing, and not necessarily a destination. I think when we saw National Harbor and MGM come, first of its kind for us, became a destination site where you do see people from DC and Virginia and neighboring jurisdictions coming to Prince George's County for that. And it is one of the largest tax revenue base for the county. So when you talk about a project that could annually bring upwards of $1 billion of revenue to the county, especially when we're looking at a deficit, it is a huge opportunity. And I'm excited about what the county executive is doing about thinking outside of the box and at the bare minimum of what we can attract to Prince George's County and putting us in the running for big projects like this that usually Prince George's County would not even be at the table or an option for.
I had a chance to speak to some friends who live at National Harbor, and all of them have said the same exact thing. One, based on what they're thinking, is that it's a great economic opportunity, not just for helping the tax base, but also as it relates to jobs.
Oh, yeah.
But the biggest concern was logistics, infrastructure, getting to something like this. If it were to come to fruition, this isn't like there's, and look, I'm not, a planning engineer, but I've been to the National Harbor enough to know there aren't a whole lot of options for building more roads to increase capacity, traffic capacity. I mean, might you build a bridge, across the water to help with that? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I definitely think that we're going to have to take a long, hard look at the infrastructure and see how to make this project work in a way that is feasible. Right. I think we're a ways from that stage, but I feel confident that we can do it. There's a lot of innovative ideas and things that we could look at around infrastructure to make it make sense. So I think, and I'll say this, I understand anytime we talk about a major project like this, it was the same when we have to think about National Harbor. Remember, there were a lot of people that didn't want that. Right? They didn't see how that was going to work. Now it is one of the best evening social attractions that we have in the county. And so the reality is that, will it take planning? Will we have to think about it? Will we have to be innovative in our strategies? Yes. But I think what we've proven is that we can do it. We just have to have the willingness to do it.
Mm-hmm. When we look at the possibility of that coming, we kind of always think about some of the most recent losses. We've discussed this before when we're talking about the football stadium, Six Flags, and the like. Last week, the design for the new RFK Stadium was released, and there were these renditions and all of it. Beautiful, no question about that. I mean, I think it is. But even as the Commanders move closer to leaving Prince George's and heading back to DC, uh, what's your plan? What's your thought process to help the county get back on its feet when it comes to these things that it's lost?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I talked about in my speech when I became chair, is that we really have to shift from being reactionary to proactive. And I think for a long time, we've really focused on the things we don't want, right? We focus on how we don't want so many self-storages, and we don't want the tobacco shops, and we don't want this. And so a lot of our legislation, our zoning has been focused on how to stop certain development. And what I've challenged my colleagues to do is, yes, we're still going to make sure that if something's harmful for the community, that we do our due diligence to make sure it doesn't come. But we need equal, if not more, attention on how to attract and be proactive for the development we want to see. So that looks at a 2050 plan, developing a new plan for the next up till 2050. It looks at focusing on how to streamline our zoning process and make it shorter. If we want to be attractive, there's some jurisdictions that can do some things in 6 months that it takes us, 2 years to do. The county executive has done her part on trying to make the permitting process faster, but there's parts of the zoning that lives with the council, and it's one of the pieces of legislation I'll be moving forward this year, is trying to streamline the process in a way that doesn't take away from community input. Then looking at solid investment and incentives. We have to look at every tool we have and make sure our incentives line up with what we want to see. Expanding our pilots and our TIFs towards not just housing, but commercial development and infrastructure. If we look historically at the pilots and the TIFs we've given in the last few years, they're all housing. But if we say we don't want to be a bedroom community, right? We have to put those towards also commercial development. So I'm really going to be focused on incentives, process, timeline, and proactively looking at attracting development so that we can build our tax base in the county.
Well, speaking of commercial development, as I'm sure you are aware, there is a great deal of discussion in the county about where county leadership comes down on these data centers. The biggest data center in the country is out in Northern Virginia, and community members are upset about this, but they also bring in a lot of money, but they use a lot of water. There have been reports talking about them raising the electric bills for communities that are the communities where they sit. I will tell you, last summer, I attended a wedding in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the community pushback on a proposed data center, even in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina, was huge. It was one of the first stories in the newscasts while I was there. So, how do you balance the possible revenue that these data centers bring in with community concern?
Yeah, I think that is probably the most important thing and important conversation, and probably one of the um, most important decisions that the council and the is going to have before them over the next year. Uh, and what I'm glad to see is I think there's varying positions that are represented on the council, and that I think is always the most important thing, that everyone that has a seat at a position of power brings a different perspective so the community can feel like they're being represented and seen. I've been very vocal that I am not for the data center in Prince George's County, and was staunchly against what happened on the Landover site. The reality that is there infrastructure that has to exist around data centers so that the technology that we have can exist? Absolutely. I compare it to like brownfield stations and where we put our trash and all these things.
Mm.
They've got to exist somewhere, right? But where they exist matters. And the same way we wouldn't put a brownfield station in a dump next to residential houses is the same way they shouldn't think to like plop a data center at Landover. It doesn't make sense. And so I think it's very important that we find a middle ground in the sense that we know they have to exist, and we all need to be realistic that they're going to exist somewhere in this country. Then we have the conversation, a true, honest conversation about where and how environmental racism works, and how we have to be mindful to protect our community to ensure that we are not being opposed upon on things that are going to harm our community. And I think that we also have to make sure we put guardrails to make sure they pay their fair share and understand the infrastructure costs on our community. And I think that we have not done that due diligence. And so I'm lucky that we're seeing movement on the state around the task force and understanding, creating parameters and guardrails for what is this going to do to our infrastructure and how is this going to impact our utility costs and who is going to have the burden of that. And I think when we do all of those things and we're very honest and we're very transparent, we can land on something that works for everyone. But the problem and why the community's up in arms, I understand, because it's what they feel with what was happening in Landover, is that no one cared about the community. They only cared about the developers had this piece of property that they had been sitting on, that they had not been developing because they don't care, because they don't live here. And they saw dollar signs of something they could bring in and didn't care what it was. And that they felt like people in power were going to let that happen. And hopefully they saw in the council and in the county executive, and what we both of our branches did is to say that's not going to happen on our watch. We are not going to let the communities be steamrolled. And that's why the county executive did her executive order. We did our resolution stopping movement until we did the due diligence that we need to do. And maybe the answer is not in Prince George's County. And maybe the answer is only in the tier or next to things like brownfields that already exist. Like I was going to presentations where some communities have been very intentional and built them in areas that were already close to things that were considered hazardous, right? That were already had the guardrails and were far from the community. So there's ways that we need to be thinking about this that have the least impact on our environment and our residents.
Speaking of community feedback, you have some listening sessions coming up. These are important because there were some residents who may not otherwise see a council member unless you go to them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope to hear from them? I mean, is it and I've never been to one. So do you just walk in the room
Mhm.
and say, "Hey, y'all, what's on your mind?" Or what is it that you're looking for?
Yeah, so we're doing them across the county, and we'll be the goal is to cater them to the needs and the issues that are most important to that region, because we understand what they want to talk about in the North County might not be the same as Central and South.
Mhm.
And the goal is to start with our vision, start with what we've heard are the concerns and what we believe are the solutions that we're looking towards. And then it be an open dialogue, right? Where, because a lot of times, you said it, people can't come up to the council. A lot of our briefings and sessions are during the day, they're not in the evening. And even when they come and testify, they get 3 minutes, but we can't respond. And so the great thing about these town halls is that there's an opportunity for dialogue to ask a question and actually get an answer. And so that the community can feel heard and seen and get the information that they need as well. And we also did a community survey. And so the goal from between the listening sessions and the countywide survey is to map our policy priorities and our budget priorities. And this is something I've done in my district. And now as chair, I want to do countywide, because it's not about just my ideas, and it shouldn't be about any individual council member and just their ideas and the ideas of people that have access to them, but it should really mirror what the community wants to see.
Mm. I want to talk to you about the school budget. It is supposed to come out today from interim school superintendent Dr. Sean Joseph. He has been very vocal under making sure that the county constituencies understand that he's making what 100 and at least $100 million worth of cuts, asking for $50 million. This is kind of one of those, I guess, my word, sustaining budgets. There just isn't a lot of money. The governor has already, in releasing his budget this week, spoken about moving some money from rainy day funds to the general fund. No one seems to have any money right now. What concerns you when you look at what Prince George's County needs, but particularly the schools?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're dealing in a deficit and it's
Mhm.
budget time, just like any household, right? When you know you have more in bills than you have in income, you're going to have to make tough decisions. And so, as a government, we are like those parents sitting at the table trying to figure out how they're going to make all of these things work. Um, and our education system is something that I think everyone understands. We don't want that to suffer, right? The backbone of our economic development is tied to our education system. When people even decide where they want to live, they look at the school system, right? We talk about when industries want to come, they look at what type of students are you producing to push into the workforce. So we know a lot is tied to our education system. And we want to make sure that they have the resources that they need to be successful. Uh, I think that we're in a better position this budget cycle than the last one. As many know, we were before facing a $147 million deficit when I served as vice chair with then chair Burrows. Now we're looking at $58 million deficit. So I do think we're in a better position to really make those tough decisions, but hopefully still get the resources and I always say the wins for the communities so that they still feel their tax dollars working for them.
Hmm. You had introduced this Mother's First bill, um, and I want to talk about that. Obviously, it's more than just legislation for you as a mother. Uh, Certainly, you remember the kind of the dust up when you were a new mother about whether or not you could do your job from home as opposed to being um, at at the county office building. Um, Talk to me a little bit about that, because we are one could argue that we are seeing more and more women, not just locally, but just nationally, taking on leadership positions, some of them young, and
Mhm.
some of them mothers, some of them wanting to be. So,
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about where this mother's first, where it is now in your
Mhm.
mind.
Yeah. This is probably one of the initiatives I'm most excited about. And you can hear my 2-year-old running in the
Yes,
background.
yes.
Um, but
Terrible
I
twos. God bless you. But
terrible twos. But because of what you just said, we have so many women making these tough decisions about their ability to have it all, right? They want to be a mother and be able to be in the workforce. And so my legislation, I've done a few pieces of legislation focused on motherhood, right? We started with virtual access for elected officials because the reality is that I was the first ever woman to serve and be pregnant at the same time. But that also led me to work on expanding parental leave for county employees. I'll never forget when I first started, when I actually worked for a council member. This is well before I was elected. And I learned that leave was only 5 days for
Mhm.
county employees. So at that time, I was able to up it through another council member by 5 days. And then when I got elected, increase it more. So working on leave, working on lactation stations, working on a Black maternal health fund for the first time, focusing on expanding doulas and working with our hospital systems to get the best care for Black women. But then also the core of this initiative is creating a village for women. So monthly meetups. We had our first monthly meetup, which was a vision brunch. And every month we'll be creating these safe spaces for women. Looking at helping 1,000 moms with in-home care. That looks at folding their laundry, washing their dishes, giving them a break. Because I learned for me, I was lucky. I have a partner. I had my family move in to help me in the home. But so many people don't have that. And so just having a break is so crucial to women and how postpartum affects them. And then having a cohort virtually where we can meet with lactation specialists, mental health providers. And so we have a very robust plan around how to help mothers. And it stemmed from my own journey. And I'm really excited about what we're going to do over the next year.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask about public safety and crime. Certainly last year, you'll probably remember, hello, young person. Um,
Yes. He said,
I,
I'm no longer going to be in the room. And he
right.
said, this is my house.
I said public safety, and he said, yes, I'm certainly concerned about my own safety. Um,
Exactly. So
as all
hello.
children should be safe.
What
Um,
is it? What is some help? What is it?
Thank you.
Ah,
that's the way it goes. There was a press conference last year um, about crime being down significantly in Prince George's County, but this year has been a little rough. There have been certainly a series of homicides and the like. Uh, what do you think is what do you think moving forward in 2026? What is the charge for the police department to continue driving down crime? What are your concerns there?
Yeah, I think that our new chief has done an amazing job really looking at how can you create spaces where you really have community policing, where he's focusing on target areas that have a high volume of incidences. And I think that's the first step. I think we also have to look at what Baltimore's doing in other jurisdictions and how they're really investing in their young people. And how when we invest in jobs, employment, recreation, that is really the key part of safety. And so I think for myself, a lot of the council members, we are really focused on a pronged approach. One, we want to attract more police. They've had more, the largest, I think, class of police in the last few years graduate. We want to make sure we have targeted policing because we know that works, and not targeting for one day, but targeted for like months at a time so that we have the type of presence that really sees results. And then I think the social services, we have to look at social services and investing in jobs and resources as a public safety strategy. And that's a priority for me as well.
Mm. Well, thank you, so much for spending some time with us, Chair Oriadha. And you can also thank your son for allowing us to have almost all of the time that we have scheduled. He's been pretty good for a good 41 minutes. So I do appreciate your time. Again, congratulations on your appointment to the chair. We will be in touch, and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much for having me and my son join you today. I'm really looking forward to this role as chair. We have a strong vision for the next year, and taking care of these little ones is the top priority.
Well, thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Oriadha,
you.
Chair of the Prince George's County Council. I appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. I'm Harold Fisher.